Maybe you think of When Harry Met Sally, or Sleepless in Seattle, or Love Actually. Everyone has their favorite among the classics of the romantic comedy genre, and if you love them, you probably really love them. But why? What makes them tick? Elan Mastai is a screenwriter responsible for one recent success, The F Word, and he joins us now for more on the appeal of the rom-com and whether the genre is fighting a losing battle at the box office. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Before we get into our conversation, let's take a look at some of your work with The F Word.
I trusted you. I trusted we were what we said we were, friends. But you can't be friends with someone if you're just skulking around waiting for some opportunity to screw them.
Oh, look, what are you talking about? It's not like you've caught me bathing in orphan blood or masturbating onto a kitten. I like you a little bit more romantically than I let on. It's not a crime. And if it is, you're not exactly innocent.
What's that supposed to mean?
You crossed all the same lines I did, and I was single. You weren't.
I've never cheated on anybody. And now you're making me feel like I somehow cheated on Ben?
Hold on. I'm making you feel like that. What, and you did nothing that I might possibly misconstrue? That night on the beach, I'll look if you look? Would you tell Ben about that?
So much honesty in that scene. Loved it, and that was Daniel Radcliffe and Zoe Kazan in The F Word. A lot of people have been writing the obituary of the rom-com genre, including this. Romantic comedies remain cost-effective and potentially high reward if they work. But gone are the days when light comedic pairings like When Harry Met Sally or 50 First Dates reliably packed multiplexes. As studios increasingly focus on films that can be sequelized and play in overseas markets, the one-off, dialogue-dependent rom-coms are a difficult sell. In addition, the decreasing appeal of young movie stars is translating into less demand for romantic pairings built around their star power. Is she right? Are we seeing the end of romantic comedies?
Yes. We're
really?
done here. We're done
No.
here. No. I mean, it's like saying, are we seeing the death of detective movies? Mm-hmm. You know, I think as long as people get murdered, you're going to have interesting stories about finding out who did it. Mm-hmm. Likewise, as long as people keep falling in love, you're going to keep having interesting stories about the complications, miscommunications, and obstacles to them finding each other and staying together. But like anything, the genre has to evolve. If I told you I wanted to do a detective story, but when the detectives are chasing the killer, they are not going to use cell phone records, they're not going to check any computer logs, they're not going to use security camera footage, they're not going to do forensic evidence or DNA testing. But that's how they're going to find the killer. You'd be like, what year is this detective movie set in? Is it 1917 or 2017? Likewise, the genre has to evolve. It has to fit our time. The classic romantic comedies were very charming, funny, emotionally moving stories about people connecting and finding each other, but they were usually also about the time, that era. They weren't just about love, they were about other things too. That's why they resonated. And so for romantic comedies now to resonate, to connect, they have to be about more than just whether two people are going to fall in love.
The other thing that the writer mentioned in what I just read was that they're not appealing to young, actors, but that was Daniel Radcliffe. He's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think when they say that, there have been some, that didn't work, right? When people say the genre is dead, they usually mean the last one I saw wasn't very good, I mean, just a few years ago, The Silver Linings Playbook, which you can't say is anything other than a romantic comedy, won Jennifer Lawrence an Oscar, was nominated for many others, made, well over $100 million because it was a good one. Right? Bad ones don't do well, just like bad anything doesn't do well.
I mean, in this atmosphere, you got your movie made.
Yeah.
Was it challenging to get The F Word made when you have to compete with with comic book heroes?
I mean, not really. I mean, it was a process to get it made, but like any movie, but you have to find the right cast. And we were fortunate. We had Daniel Radcliffe loved the script and wanted to do the movie. We found Zoe Kazan, Adam Driver, Mackenzie Davis, Rafe Spall. These are all terrific actors, and they just love. What they loved about the script was the characters, the sense of humor, and the dialogue. I mean, that's one thing that romantic comedies have always been great at is really terrific, memorable, quotable dialogue. At the same time, there's a larger shift that has nothing to do with romantic comedies. That has to do with the movie business, where those kind of mid-range movies, the ones that don't cost $200 million and have explosions, a lot of those movies are migrating towards television as well as streaming services like your Netflix and your Amazons. A lot of stories that would have been movies 10 years ago are now TV series.
But why do they do that? Because like one of my favorite recent movies was The Best Man Holiday.
Right.
And I think it opened first, like it was #1 at the box office.
Yeah.
So that would be considered a mid-size,
That's
mid-range
right.
movie, right?
Yeah.
So if there's audiences that will go see them, why don't you appeal to that audience?
Well, I mean, you saw that movie and it was a success. I just don't think they make as many of them as they used to, but they don't make as many of everything as they used to. All the studios are making way less movies, and they're putting a lot more money into sort of their key, what they call, their tent poles, right? So that's a general shift, and you have TV series like Girls or The Mindy Project, even Louie. I mean, those are basically just romantic comedies, and 10 years ago, those would have been independent films, and now Master of None is another good example. I mean, that just would have been a movie 10 years ago. Now it's a TV series. Whether those stories benefit from being 10 hours long instead of 2 hours long is another question. I think a lot of the time I see these shows, and I thought Master of None was hilarious, but I could have watched like 2 hours of it. Like I didn't necessarily have to watch 12 hours of it, right? It ends up being like both the movie and 6 sequels all at once.
Well, maybe they'll make a movie.
Yeah, well, that's the whole thing with Girls, right? That they set up, they want to make a movie now, just like they did with Sex and the City, just like they did with Entourage. That's a new model, which is like, let's do a bunch of seasons of the series and then we'll do a movie.
And see if it works and then has an audience. And increasingly, we're also seeing rom-coms that are like 500 Days of Summer, How to Be Single, where the protagonists end up single because historically, rom-coms, it's about two people getting together.
Yeah.
Does that say something about screenwriters, or does it reflect the audience, what the audience wants?
I think it reflects being alive in the world, right? Screenwriters are writing about their experiences, what they see in the world around them, and audiences respond when they feel that it's truthful. I mean, that's the thing about the romantic comedy genre. It's the one genre you can't really hide in. If I'm writing a spy movie or an action-adventure movie or a detective movie, you aren't going to be like, oh, well, that's not how spies work. Either the movie seems credible or it's not, but you can't draw off your own experience to say, well, that's not how I would solve a crime. But with a romantic comedy, everybody's an expert because everybody's an expert in love, attraction, desire, flirtation. So when we recognize that a movie is false, if they're faking it, if it doesn't feel honest, we know.
When we categorize things into genres, do you think that hurts our the fact that we can be open-minded to just see a movie because it's a good movie instead of it being in a particular genre?
Well, look, I mean, it's hard for me to answer that because I'm the kind of person, like, I would be happy just to walk into the multiplex, not know anything about the movie, no trailers, no ads, and just see whatever's playing. Because I love movies, and I like to be surprised. And often, I find the modern way of marketing movies is to wipe all surprises away. I mean, even the trailer, I'm very proud of the F Word, and I love the movie, but the trailer gave away, like, at least 3/4 of the movie. And that's just how, and we had that argument with the people who put the trailer together. They're like, that's what modern audiences want. They want to see the whole movie before they go to it. I disagree, but I'm not the one cutting trailers together.
Well, we talked about TV, and I want to read something to bring that back into the conversation. While traditional romantic comedies have seen a demise on film, there's still an upside. The dearth of these stories on the big screen has led to creativity on TV. Sharp series like Hulu's The Mindy Project or CW's Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, which I love, feature female protagonists who grew up internalizing all the backwards lessons of the romantic comedy fantasy and consequently struggle to build healthy relationships. Do romantic comedies set up impossible expectations when it comes to love and romance?
Yes. I mean, that's a problem with the genre. But it's no different than, if you ever had a medical issue and you go to a hospital, like every doctor you meet is not going to be House, right? When something, right? But when a crime happens in real life and the cops show up, like it's not The Wire, and they're not also John McClane from Die Hard. They're just like regular people, just like doctors are regular people. Entertainment in general tends to sort of like romanticize and sort of exaggerate the competence level and the intensity of all experiences. That's what movies and TV are for in a lot of ways. So, I mean, one of the things that we really strove for with the F Word was to have a movie that was really funny and charming and romantic, but it's very much about that idea. Do you trade something that's good and comfortable for something that could be great, that could be even better, but it's a risk? Are you going to give up something that you know is working for something that's even better? But that's one part. But then the next level, and that's what the characters grapple with, is they grew up, they live in the modern world, they've seen romantic comedies, they've had complicated love lives. There is no perfect relationship. There's no ideal, ecstatic love that triumphs over all and wipes all problems away and you'll never have an argument and no one will ever leave the toilet seat up or forget to do the dishes.
And your issues won't be solved in 30 minutes.
That's right. It's going to be real. And so you're not trading a good relationship for a perfect one. You're trading a good relationship for one that could be even better, but is also going to be complicated. And so I think when romantic comedies embrace the messiness of life, they're usually much more successful. They don't seem corny and cheesy. You know, I think one of the things that people sort of, resisted about a movie like Love Actually, for example, although I really like the movie, and some people adore that movie, is that it felt too like love will wipe away all your problems, which we know from real life isn't true.
But it can sometimes. Well, do you think people are being too cynical?
I think it depends on how happy you are in your personal life. I think if you don't like Love Actually, it's probably because you're not happy in your personal life.
And you're probably
right?
not a human being.
Yeah.
Because I love that movie.
No, I mean, and I think it's a terrific movie as well. And I think one of the things that's great about it is that it provides a whole bunch of different perspectives. It's like a mosaic, But no, I think usually if you're happy in your love life, you're less cynical. I mean, that's just the nature of things. I think that love does have a kind of, you could say it's a narcotizing effect, or you could just say it's a way of making all the little things not feel as oppressive or as hard because you have someone who loves you. And
like the Mindy Kaling on the Mindy Project, she actually makes fun of the fact that she grew up, she loves romantic comedies, and because her ideals are so unrealistic, it's actually ruining her love life. I
think that's a real problem. That's something that goes back for generations. I mean, we've been telling these stories for a long time, and one of the reasons why I think the romantic comedies don't always work is when they don't update themselves for the modern world. When they're like a detective story that doesn't use cell phone records or DNA evidence, right? When they're written as if like modern life hasn't happened. When they embrace modern life, they're usually much more, I think we love watching people connect on screen. That's one of the, we don't go see movies because of the plot. Really. The plot might be why you're intrigued, but when you fall in love with a movie, it's because of the characters. And that's what romantic comedies do better than almost any genre, is let you fall in love with the characters.
Because you can relate to them.
Because you can relate to them and you want to spend time with them, I think when you go back and watch a romantic comedy over and over again, it's not because you forgot whether they're going to fall in love. It's because it's like hanging out with your best friends, When you go out with your best friends, is it like, every single time it's new? No, you tell the same stories, you have the same sense of humor, you remember funny things you did in the past, and you have an amazing time, not because it's so new, you didn't know what was going to happen. No, it's exactly what you thought was going to happen, which is you're going to hang out with people you really like and make each other laugh.
And speaking of best friends, let's take a look at best friends in your movie, The F Word.
There is a fourth option.
Yeah?
Be honest. Tell her how you feel. Might ruin the friendship, but at least you stood up like a man and expressed your feelings.
Wait, I'm sorry. Since when does being a man involve expressing your feelings? I mean, did I miss a memo? Because if I recall, being a man meant hiding your feelings forever. Like Bruce Willis. You never see Bruce Willis expressing his feelings. Most you ever get out of Bruce is a hint of melancholy at the edge of a smirk.
Do you think Bruce Willis would be happy just being friends? 100% honesty is the foundation of any relationship.
Whoa, you are 100% honest with Nicole?
Yes.
About everything?
Yep.
What, New Orleans 2006? What was her name? Favia? Yeah, she did look like a woman, to be fair.
99% honesty is the foundation of any relationship.
It's not worth the risk. Not if it means losing her as a friend.
So then it's option 5.
What's that?
You move on.
Some great advice from the wonderful Adam Driver and Daniel Radcliffe in The F Word.
One of my favorite things about that is we very intentionally, instead of pretending like they're the same height, we always shot it where Adam's sort of towering over Daniel in the shot and kind of like haranguing him from above. And, Daniel's like looking up at him all the time. I really like the dynamic.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the height difference, because I think the one thing that struck me in the film is that Radcliffe, who plays Wallace, is not most people's ideas of what a traditional leading man is.
Unless you're one of the billions of people who saw Harry Potter.
I mean, exactly right. And so I'm wondering, is the beta male overtaking the alpha male in today's rom-coms? Or what used to be traditional roles?
I mean, I don't know, ask Billy Crystal that, or ask Woody Allen that, or ask Jack Lemmon that. I mean, sure, there's always been the Cary Grants, and there's also always been the Jack Lemmons. I mean, that's, I think you can tell, gloriously handsome men with, dimples in their jaw and muscles fall in love, but so do funny, nebbishy people. So do people of all colors and backgrounds and sexualities. I mean, everybody falls in love. And so, it's not just sort of beautiful people whose relationships are hilarious. So no, I mean, He's a great actor. He's funny. We intentionally cast Daniel and Zoe because we thought that they have great chemistry. And more than anything in these movies, it is about chemistry. If you don't believe the connection between them, no amount of writing and camera work and costumes and music is going to help. So like what we're investing in is the connection between these two: their sense of humor, the romantic longing, and the chemistry, which is a little bit, just like in life, it's hard to pin that down. Why do you connect with certain people and not others? Why, when you meet a certain person, can that change your life? And you can meet thousands, tens of thousands of other people, and your life hasn't changed at all.
Over the years, like we were talking about, the subject has changed when it comes to romantic comedies. But how has the portrayal of women changed?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that's been great about the romantic comedy genre is running, as long as we've been making these kind of movies, they're often about women struggling with sort of like traditional gender roles. I mean, you look at His Girl Friday. His Girl Friday is based on a play on the front page, right? And in the original play and the original movie, it was two men. Right, one of the great changes that they made with His Girl Friday, which made it a classic, was they made the editor character, Cary Grant's character, is still a man, but the journalist character was female, was Rosalind Russell, and they had a romantic history instead of just a professional history, and it became a movie in I think it's 1941 or 42 that movie came out. She's trying to decide, do I want to be a modern woman, basically, right? In the context of the 40s, do I want to be in this workplace which is all consuming and which sort of forces me to constantly be challenged ethically, morally, professionally, have this kind of like tempestuous relationship with my boss, probably technically sexual harassment by our standards now, but it was the 40s. Or do I want to go off with Ralph Bellamy, who doesn't challenge me, who doesn't ask anything of me, who simply loves me, and go off and just be a happy housewife in the suburbs and not have this sort of like crazy urban life? And the movie says, I think quite beautifully, sure, if that's who you are. Are you that person, or are you simply exhausted and you just need, are you denying who you really are?
And it's interesting because that was made in the 40s, but I think a lot of women probably have those same kind of challenges now.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the best romantic comedies are truthful about those challenges. I think when we see a romantic comedy and we say like we reject it because it just feels phony, they create these false binaries, of course, right? We've all seen these movies where the woman has a high-powered career, but she's got no love life, and she meets somebody, and she's got to give up her career in order to be happy. And we all say, that's not what real life is like. Real life is messy. Yeah, you can't have everything, but you also try to have both. And you sort of stumble and trip your way to try to find some sort of balance. And when we see movies that embrace the messiness of life, generally we say, yes, I recognize that. And we see ones that create these false binaries, these sort of ridiculous choices that no human being would ever make.
But even like a recent movie like Trainwreck, what did you think of that, Trainwreck?
I thought it was very funny. I thought she was great in the role. I think that it attempted to find a modern way of exploring, what romantic comedies struggle with is as we've removed all these obstacles of class and money, obstacles of race and gender, what are holding people back? Right? So it becomes important to be very specific. Well, it's her character, right? She grew up in a broken home with a father who raised her to believe that marriage and commitment were the worst thing that could ever happen to you. And so she's created all these protective shells around herself. She makes herself into somebody who would never commit. And then she meets somebody who makes her question all that. And she's not just questioning the identity that she grew up with and the advice she got from the father she reveres, but she's also risking failure, humiliation, and rejection, right? And that is a very human thing.
And that role was played by Amy Schumer.
Yeah, who wrote it for herself. Because, that's another great example. That movie made her a movie star, right?
And it was a romantic comedy, and it made a lot of money.
That's right, it made a ton of money on a low budget. Now, so you have to separate the health of the genre from just Hollywood economics, right? And Hollywood, most of our movie stars, even now, we fall in love with them in romantic comedies. Jennifer Lawrence, we fell in love with her in a romantic comedy. Amy Schumer, Julia Roberts, Renee Zellweger, they all came into our attention because of romantic comedies.
I'm glad you mentioned Julia Roberts. 25 years ago, Pretty Woman was a big movie. Now it's one of the most divisive movie, I think. Why? Why was it so successful then, and then now it's kind of like, eh?
Well, I think it was successful because we liked the chemistry between Richard Gere and Julia Roberts. We would like watching them together. We liked them sparring. Why is it divisive? Well, social mores change and things that, now I think we expect a little more realism and depth. You know, I mean, she does play a hooker and he hires her. Like, the gender dynamics are very strange by 2017 standards, maybe not so by the standards, I think it was 1992 when it came out. At the same time, the movie was very clearly, it did it in a sort of an exaggerated way. It was about the time. It was about love, but it was about money. It was about how much class, right? And it was about that era, and so it spoke to that era. Now, I think probably in another 20 years it will be a classic again, just the way The Apartment is a classic. You know, in 1960 when The Apartment came out, yeah, it was about relationships, but it was about the clash between capitalism and the individual. That's really what the movie is about. It's about how much of yourself do you give over to the company you work for? How much do you let the company you work for tell you how to live? And how much do you make your own decisions, right? And that was a big question in the late 50s, early 60s.
Right. Now, when we look at the obstacle in a film romance, because there always seems to be one, are there some obstacles that reflect the time when the movie was released, which wouldn't make sense today? I guess that one would be one of them.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you look at something like Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Now, there's certainly race issues in romance have not gone away, but it would be a very, very different movie now because the dramatic nature of it would feel different now. You'd have to be very specific about who those people were if they were having that same kind of conversation. Certainly the people that, you know, a lot of us spend our time around, that movie would seem out of date. You'd have to find another way of telling that story. But I mean,
but even now, like recently, the like Moonlight made such a huge splash last year because you'd never seen those characters on screen before.
Right, and telling that story about the Black gay experience in Miami, we hadn't seen that story. And the humor, but also the heart, the emotion of it, you know, you could have told that story with other characters, absolutely, and it probably still would have been affecting, but it wouldn't have been as groundbreaking.
What about Pride and Prejudice? Because I've seen this just remade so many times. How is it that audiences find this story relatable in 2017?
Well, I think they really like the characters. I think, again, like, I think Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy are great characters, and they can keep, you kind of keep finding them again. At the same time, like, that's a romance, of course, and it's like a romantic comedy, but, you know, it's still tied into the era, class, you know, the financial side of marriage, which, you know, I mean, it doesn't feel as stark as it did back then. And so that aspect of it can feel outdated. And so, but when it's a period piece, that's how, you know, you still believe it.
It seems like romantic comedies approach difficult subjects in I guess in a way where you don't really realize that they're challenging a lot of issues, right? So do you think that because they're called, we perceive romantic comedies to be, you know, like whipped cream on your hot chocolate, we don't really respect the genre as much as we should?
I think that's very true, yeah. I think that the history of romantic comedies is the history of having a sidelong way of dealing with the hot button issues of the modern world, but because it's funny and because it's charming and because it's under the genre of romantic comedy, you kind of don't notice that you're actually grappling with like serious issues. I mean, you know, movies like Knocked Up, movies like Trainwreck.
Oh, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner?
Right, they were dealing with the hot button issues of the day, but because you were laughing and you were charmed, you sort of don't realize it till after that you actually were like, it's also, they're not just romantic comedies, they're also sort of sociology.
And decades later, you're like, wow, that was something. Let's look at 2017 obstacles. How has technology and social media affected the rom-com?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the problems the genre is grappling with right now is that it's not always dealing with technology and social media. You know, we got a bunch of really interesting comments from people because often in the F word, when a character was waiting for another character, we had them pull out their cell phone and kind of like just texting on it or like checking their email. You know, there's a plot point where it hinges on somebody deciding whether they're going to delete a contact in their contact list. And people were like that, they saw that they were so refreshing just to see the very simple pulling out your cell phone and kind of looking at it when you're waiting for somebody. They're like, I hadn't seen that in romantic comedies. You know, it's like they're still pretending it's the 70s. When you're waiting for somebody, you're just waiting for them. You know, nobody does that anymore. You pull out your cell phone. Nobody waits for anybody. You always are checking social media. And so just something simple as that made the movie feel more fresh. And that was our intention. And so, but I think when when a romantic comedy doesn't grapple with the effects of technology on our daily lives, it's the same as a detective story that doesn't have genetic testing or DNA or forensics. You have to stay current, but it's hard because it's accelerating so quickly.
Now, you're really busy right now. You're working on the screenplay to your own novel about time travel, All Are Wrong Todays. Is it going to be a film about time travel or a rom-com where time travel is the obstacle?
That's very astute. I mean, it is at the heart of All Are Wrong Todays, despite the time travel and alternate realities. It's a relationship story. It's a love story. And it's a story about what one character is going to do to try to recapture a love that was lost, and then all the complications that come from that. It's about the what-ifs of life. So yeah, no, it's very much a romantic, the romance is at the heart of it. The desire for love and connection is what drives the whole plot. Not just for my main character, but for some of the subsidiary characters as well. Almost all the plot turns in the movie are fundamentally about heartbreak.
I can't wait to see it. Do you have an idea of who you might want to play the leading roles?
It's very hard. I mean, I have to admit, I don't really write like that. Like because I write the characters, I want them to feel as real as possible and not feel like a specific actor. And then, I didn't write the F word for Daniel Radcliffe. It wouldn't have even occurred to me because when I started writing it, he was like 16 and playing Harry Potter. He grew into the role, and when we cast him, we worked together to kind of make it sound like him, to embrace him in the part. Same with Zoe and Adam and Mackenzie and all the other actors. And so I think that's, to be successful, a romantic comedy has to be specific, because it's not just about two archetypical characters, it's about two specific people. Because every love story is about two specific people. You don't fall in love with just like some archetypical person, right? You and everything that makes you who you are falls in love with a person and everything that makes them who they are. And part of your job as a writer is to be as specific as possible, because when you're as specific as possible, you get to be universal.
Elan, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.